some of the hardest things, the longer you're a Christian, the more you're going to find out you have less lost friends. And to be missional, to make Jesus known, you have to make more lost friends, whether that's your neighbors or your coworkers or the people around you. You have to be intentional about doing that. But the thing you have to be careful with is, are they influencing me or am I influencing them? Hey, welcome to this week's edition of Ask the Pastor. This is our weekly segment where we take our Sunday sermon and we dive a little bit deeper in. We either ask more questions of the text or how can we apply it to our personal lives. This past Sunday, we kicked off a brand new series through the book of Philemon, which is a short book, literally not even Philemon chapter 1, because it's just one chapter, 25 verses in this little book of Philemon, but it's all about relationships. And this book is the most personal letter or book that Paul writes. And he writes it out of a place of relationships to Christians, to people inside the church at that time. And for us, as we go into this, we started examining it. And in this first sermon really opened up with this idea of who are my people? That currently we're in a culture, and younger generations are seeing this at an alarming speed, of some of the loneliest generations we've ever seen. We saw statistics that 1/3 of Americans state that at least once a day, at some point, feel like they are lonely. You go the younger that is, and on the younger scale of young adults coming into age, that number rises to 61%, where they feel like they have chronic loneliness. There's a huge issue in our world of people feeling lonely. And inside the church, inside Christianity, honestly, that shouldn't be an issue if we're doing things right, if we're doing things in a biblical way. Because Christianity is about having a unity that we believe Jesus is Lord, and we form relationships around that. But here's what the questions that kind of come up is, if you have a church family, and I encourage you to have a church family, and if you're getting more involved in your church family, you'll start to form relationships. You'll start to know other people, that you'll have your common interest in Christ, but maybe also have common interest in sports and in hobbies and family stages and all those things. And those are great, and those communities should bond. But then it begs some other questions of, should that be my only friends? And one of the questions we'll start with today, is it okay to be friends with people who aren't Christians? And on the surface, the answer to that question, I would say, is absolutely yes. I tell people all the time that when you come to Christ, that is one of the greatest opportunities you have in your life of being missional and of making Jesus known to people around you. Is that if you're coming out of a sinful or a lost or a non-knowing Jesus background, and then all of a sudden Jesus reveals himself to you, you are saved, all of a sudden your life transforms. One of the greatest things is to then go tell your friends who are not Christians about what Jesus has done in your life. And maybe they've seen that progress. They've seen some maybe stuff that you've struggled with, addictions or depression or loneliness, and they see this new life you have in Jesus. And that can be infectious, and that can be a great way to live out your mission and call people. But here's the line that we have in that. Because you have to look, and this is this word I want to focus on today, that really is the gauge for how we should determine our friendships, is what is happening with influence. Every friendship, there is influence. And sometimes that influence is much more mutual and going both ways, but sometimes it's maybe a little more one-sided. For example, I have friends who are older than me, are wiser than me, are in a greater stage of life than me, and a better leader than me, and they influence me a lot. That we're still friends, we do things that aren't just necessarily focused on growth and focused on maybe becoming a better dad or leader or whatever you want to fill in that blank, but they influence me in how I should live my life. I learn from them. I ask questions. I see how they do things, and it influences me to live my life in a certain way. There's also other relationships that I have with people who are maybe a few steps behind me. Maybe they haven't gone through some of the life stages or through the trials, or they're just leading in different capacities. And I get to influence them to show them, hey, this is how to live life. This is how to go through these scenarios. This is how to be a good father or be a good husband. This is how to lead staff members and be in an organization. All those different things, there is an influence happening. And sometimes with some of your friends, maybe that's more of a same stage, that you guys are mutually influencing each other in a positive way. But here's where this word also becomes so important when we talk about this Christian life, is as a Christian, there's a balance of you need to make sure that inside a church, you are surrounding yourself with relationships that are influencing you, and you are influencing other people in a positive way that is doing two things. That is influencing one another to grow closer to Jesus, to be more like Jesus, to do the things Jesus, to be loving, to be generous, to be have goodness and holiness, to be reading our Bibles, to be praying, to be better neighbors and citizens. But we also should be influencing each other to do less bad stuff, to sin less. That's why we have small groups. That's why we have Celebrate Recovery, so we can be open and honest about these are the things I struggle with. And then we can influence. And this Sunday, we're going to look at a stage in that influence, which is encouragement. We can encourage one another to stop those behaviors and to continue or start doing the right behaviors. But here's the hard part of that influence, is if you don't have the right people who are influencing you, the good, strong Christians, and you only have a group of friends who does not know Jesus, who does not live a Christian lifestyle, who could care less about living a good and holy and discipleship type lifestyle, then they are going to influence you to live a life that you do not want to live in Jesus. And those relationships are great. And actually, in the church, some of the hardest things, the longer you're a Christian, the more you're going to find out you have less lost friends. And to be missional, to make Jesus known, you have to make more lost friends, whether that's your neighbors or your coworkers or the people around you. You have to be intentional about doing that. But the thing you have to be careful with is, are they influencing me or am I influencing them? Because as followers of Jesus, we should be making Jesus known. We should be influencing our communities, influencing our families, influencing those around us to know who Jesus is and to be more like Jesus. We should not be letting culture, we should not be letting those far from Jesus influence us to run from him and live a life of sin. And in this whole idea, I think that's struggling right now, especially in younger generations, that we just need to be on guard against, is we need to be careful that we aren't just finding friends, we aren't just building a tribe, we aren't just building good community to counter the loneliness in our lives. It's really easy to be lonely right now. Sadly, we don't have as many face-to-face interactions as we used to. And a lot of times we're looking for community. Usually we find it online, then we find it more in person. And those can still be great things, that there is a lot of great community and great friendships that can happen digitally. That's a blessing we have. But if we aren't careful, and if we aren't surrounding ourselves with the right people first, then it is going to be so easy, even if we don't realize it's happening, to be influenced by the world around us, to be influenced by the culture around us, instead of doing what Christianity has done ever since the New Testament, of forming communities of people who are united by Jesus and Jesus alone, who are encouraging one another, who are spurring each other on to follow him more deeply, so that we can make an impact. We can make an influence on the world around us. Hey, thank you guys for joining us this week. We'll see you next time.